Hello everyone, welcome to the third Newcomers tournament. I'm your host, Vio Fanic, with my co-host Blues. We have a
Hello.
game with Vampirus, Cheesecake, Bogus, Rogus, and Bobson. What do you think about this map, Blues?
Well, the thing that really sticks out to me is how many green prices there are. Just going
Oh
right
yeah,
off of that, there's potential scientific founds, and maybe one or two scavengers. Things
yeah.
get a bit dicey.
There's one scientist found that should go early, maybe right now. If I'm honest, some
Right.
expansive spots that people could take.
HQ has been founded.
Bogus Rogus
A
taking the
scavenger HQ has
first
been founded.
science found. I'd like it to be shifted up just a little bit so it's
Right.
closer to that water.
Yeah, just a little up and to the left.
Bobson founding second.
Not quite sure what sort of water he crushed doing that, but overall it's still a pretty solid location.
Then Vampirus with our other scavenger. Neither of these
has been
scavengers
founded.
are super great.
They have the adjacent carbon and water, which is solid, but Silicon this game is going to be not that difficult. There's this patch in the west for both scavengers to take advantage of.
I'm going to have to assume that Cheesecake misclicked and meant to
Yes.
found robot because they're opening with the standard robot build.
Always rather unfortunate.
Fortunately,
The black market is online.
people who are new to the robot reclamation industries, as this R is actually the scavenger. Bogus Rogus and Bobson are the first and number two. Bogus Rogus is going for a carbon, high carbon.
That's going to make Cheesecake very sad once he
Yes,
realizes.
it will make Cheesecake extremely sad. I prefer if Bogus Rogus went for some aluminum instead.
Yes, aluminum is
It
going
is
to be very
high.
important.
They are going to take, say, water pump.
On the other hand, Bobson is collecting a whole lot of aluminum. If he sells that down instead of keeping the price high, then skipping aluminum could potentially be a good move by the other players. But it doesn't seem to be happening so far.
Bobson is going into an early level 2 power play, building up 2 windmills.
Which
They don't
is,
have...
between the power colony and the power price, that's pretty reasonable. The only reason I'd be very concerned about that is he's still only operating on a single low carbon quarry.
Right, and I don't think they've noticed that Cheesecake didn't get any carbon down until now. It's going to be driving that carbon price up for a while.
A scavenger HQ
I would have liked to see Vampirus maybe go into these extra 2 carbon quarries now, try to take advantage of both her opponents being so low on carbon. We'll see what happens.
I do like her move into 2 farms. She is the first to HQ number 3. And mutiny that high carbon tile away from Bogus Rogus.
HQ has been upgraded.
And identifying that Bogus Rogus might be a primary competitor shutting down that steel right after it was boosted.
Going into this extra aluminum does feel like a mistake, though. Even though aluminum is sticking high, you can pretty much see Bobson doing what he's doing.
Crashing the aluminum out, yes. Now, it might not be the worst because she can construct a wind turbine there. Now, does that get adjacency from the geothermal?
It does not.
Sold.
It does not. Okay, well then. Okay, it's worse than I thought. Bobson also to level 3. I'd still like to see them pick up some more carbon. Operating off of this one low carbon is not sustainable with carbon at 77 and the climbing.
And Cheesecake is actually also going into wind. That feels a bit strange to me given how difficult carbon is. Then again, I suppose geotherms will have the same problem, and Cheesecake is miles away from all the silicon, so I guess there aren't any good options for him.
Right, and this is where you kind of see newer players going into power maybe a little bit too early. I might have preferred to see Cheesecake go to level 3 and then take the power.
I think given the power price, going into power is reasonable. It's just, I don't think Cheesecake could afford it given his resource situation.
Correct. Bobson going for a early patent lab, replacing one of those aluminum mines. I'd be interested to see what they are going to research the HQ3 patent rush.
This whole time, Bobson has been getting a whole lot done with this power, going to that full triangle, making money off of power, but he still has never secured more carbon, and that's the main source of concern for him. Otherwise, I feel like he'd be easily up to HQ4 by now, maybe even pushing towards 5.
Speaking of players at HQ4, Vampiris has upgraded HQ4, going into a triple food triangle, getting some nice adjacency bonus there. Going into double geotherms, along with those 2 aluminum mines, means that Vampiris is going to have a lot of claims far away from her base.
Always a concern for the late game as a scavenger.
Especially since on this map there are no briber claims. Bogus Rogus is researching teleportation. And what is Bobson? Bobson is also researching teleportation. Bogus Rogus will beat Bobson to teleportation. With that undefended patent lab, you think Bobson might want to try shutting that down.
Right.
Especially since the prices of goons have not crept up very high.
Oh, Bogus Rogus has gone ahead and defended it just now. Second Goon Squad bot all game.
Who has the first?
That's on Bobson's patent lab.
Bobson's. Okay.
I think one thing you have to maybe wonder a little bit about for Bogus Rogus is prioritizing teleportation quite so highly. He already has access to this iron and water. Silicon is a bit farther away, but
the only thing it helps at the moment is this metal mine, which was shipping quite a long distance. Aluminum mine, sorry.
What I would wonder about is that maybe with power sticking high and him at a fairly high amount of debt, maybe he looks at a superconductor instead, getting his geo moved up very nicely. Maybe you go for slant drilling, get a bit more adjacency, although that's not really all that necessary.
No, instead, Bogus Rogus is going to use that teleportation to build 2 chemical refineries, taking advantage of this high chemical price. However, the fuel price is high too, and so I'm not sure how much profit these are going to make.
Right.
98 each, that's not bad at all.
It's definitely solid, only consuming that half fuel a second, so even with that price high, there is room for profit. What I am worried about with this sort of play is that you have 3 scavenger opponents, which I guess carbon is awkward enough that might be a problem. But also, Bogus Rogus already has this high carbon secured. Going into even more carbon tiles is a bit of an overcommitment, I feel. Might do better with something like carbon scrubbing, which Bogus Rogus is going for. So that's 3 carbon tiles and still going for carbon scrubbing.
Vampiris has the upgrade if she wants to take it, probably holding out because a few other couple players have, Bogus Rogus particularly, have a sizable amount of cash on hand.
He has also managed to pay off all her debt off just these 2 geotherms and making a small amount of money on power.
On to Bobson. I really think that this 4th single wind turbine is a mistake.
Yes. There's not much else to say about it.
We've been harping on this all game. Still, more carbon would be nice. It is low in price, but it's not that low.
And especially if the plan is to get off-worlds up later, having that carbon running in now is a big deal. And you also see Bobson's just nowhere close to this upgrade.
No, off-world prices are currently low, with the highest launch being 19k. This hacker array, going for 12,000, seems a little bit low. However, hacker arrays are a lot harder to use in FFAs, and given that these are newer players, I understand it going for so low.
Rogus using it to hack chems, gonna work very nicely for him. No one is in chems. Chems are expensive. He is producing chems.
He is stockpiling chems also, instead of auto-selling, so that is good.
Indeed. One thing I will say about Bobson's wind turbine decision, I think maybe you can justify it if you think he thought he had
Scientific
teleportation
HQ has been
secured,
upgraded.
then he could transition this wind triangle into some sort of production, and just maybe have just 2 wind turbines down there, which will almost cover costs for most of the rest of the game. But
I thought that wind turbine happened after teleportation was denied, but I could be wrong.
I could also be
Vampirus
wrong.
is adrenaline boosting her water and water production nicely. Nobody's punishing her for that, which is a mistake. Vampirus also going for slant drilling at this point in time.
He does at least have that goon on the boosted tiles, so it's not quite as risky as some of the previous ones were. Then again, with power surges, not quite
Yes.
like an EMP that might target that tile directly.
Slant drilling will help her reduce the amount of claims that she has on water. She still has 3 tiles left that she can use. It'll be interesting to see where she prioritizes those. She is shipping in some silicon, although that's a mutiny tile.
Yeah, there isn't really a great silicon tile for her to grab. Maybe just way down south, but I understand hesitating to do that.
Bogus Rogus also up at level 5. Still sitting on his claims. Has 2 patent labs. Where is the second?
The optimization center is online. Let the planned obsolescence begin.
I don't see the second. But they're only using one of those patent labs.
The mutinied patent lab from Vampires.
Aha.
Nuke for sale. Underground nuclear explosion device for sale.
I suppose Bogus Rogus just wants to make sure that they get slant drilling and not Vampirus.
Congratulations.
Underground nuke going for 9,000 to Vampirus.
That is definitely going to be good. That carbon was looking a bit weak if it was going to get nuked. One thing
Building a off-world. Off-world prices have crept up to 27k for an oxygen launch, 24k for a fuel launch.
it is
So
holograms, but
Vampirus-
it is not goon squatted. And the cooldown is up, so that's something you do have to wonder about.
Immediately decides to nuke Bobson's silicon down from a high to a low.
I can't say I like that move. Right now, Vampires doesn't have access to Silicon herself. It is in her best interest to let multiple of her opponents have access to the Silicon, so they can fight over that, instead of maybe giving Bogus Rogus this big advantage.
Now, one
Although-
thing we haven't talked about is Bobson's aggressive moves into Cheesecake and now Bogus Rogus.
Yes, they're not doing much for him, quite frankly.
Unfortunately, Bobson doesn't really have much income flowing through now that those 4 power tiles are dead.
Right.
And at this point, they should be selling out of Cheesecake to get the upgrade to level 5.
And just looking at a few other maybe mistakes that he's made, he has the single farm down, he has a single glass furnace down, he has this optimization center down that, and it's been down for quite some time, it's never been used. Instead, he's been just spending 100k around on all this stock. Stuck back at HQ4, it's just hard to see where he's going from here.
Right. Never a good idea to build these black magic tiles. Always go for that adjacency. Meanwhile, Cheesecake has finally powered up to level 4. Has a triangle of glass, but no silicon coming in. A triangle of farm, some water, and the 2 lows on the carbon tiles. Sitting in sea levels of that,
new claim is available for auction.
Unfortunately, Cheesecake was hurt by
Just the misfound really hurt him early on, and now
Misfound and then Bogus Rogus. Now, Bobson immediately needs to sell out of Cheesecake to defend themselves.
I think Bogus Rogus has done a very good job of establishing strong production. Pretty much all his tiles are making great money. That's part of being a scientist, partly also because Cheesecake and Bobson have been slow to advance and haven't really been able to produce much. What I do worry about is that he never committed to more water tiles. He's stuck on just 3 farms. He could never get into additional reactors on top of that. Maybe just putting down these chem labs on top of water instead would have been nice, something along those lines. But him going ahead, securing all the stock is a nice play. He clearly has the lead here, and this helps him prop up his stock price, which is suffering due to his debt. I would also like to see him push out of D debt, because otherwise that could snowball a bit, give Vampires maybe an opening to push back into things.
Bogus Rogus split the stock from Bobson, but got the majority of the buy, so received the majority of Cheesecake's stocks in a slightly better position in this case. Vampirus, meanwhile, sitting over here on A levels of debt with a boosted, now gooned off-world.
Right, that's been
She
doing good work.
unfortunately is launching the wrong launch, still launching auto-launching Oxygen at 13k when aluminum is actually chemicals are the launch at 32k. Sometimes it's hard to look that far down.
Chemicals can tend to be a bit of a sneaky good launch, but it's easy to miss. One thing I do worry about the Vampires, these aluminum tiles, we pointed them out earlier as maybe being a bit of an overcommitment, and we see now 1300 aluminum. I'm not sure what they could become. Honestly, power isn't an issue. Maybe you can look to ship in some reactors or something, but just not a great position to be in.
Bogus Rogus does have the right idea about using the black market on Vampirus, although I question how useful mutinying this single carbon tile is. Vampirus has a huge stockpile of carbon, which most scavengers do at this point in the game.
Right, especially with so many carbon tiles.
When they've not transitioned out. So, unfortunately, in this game, there are no spies. What I'd rather see Bogus Rogus do is use the very cheap network viruses to try and hunt down Vampirus' off-world.
That would probably be a good option, assuming that Bogus Rogus may not realize that Vampirus has an off-world up. What was going on before with the power surges on this water reactor cluster was also just very effective.
Correct. And that was Bogus Rogus? Let's check. Yes, Bogus Rogus.
The black market is
Power
open for business.
surge,
The scavenger
Vampirus
HQ has been
once.
upgraded.
Bogus Rogus doing a good job of noticing the chem launches are more profitable at this point and switching over partially.
Partially. Still shipping the food at 13k though, every other launch.
The thing about that is that both Vampirus and Bogus Rogus have fairly large stockpiles of food, probably dealing with a shortage, so it might be a bit more profitable than it seems.
Now, Bogus Rogus could have purchased Cheesecake if they wanted to, but instead chose to purchase into Vampirus' stock. What do you think about that move?
I think that's perfectly reasonable. Bogus Rogus picked up Cheesecake stock pretty much as a side effect of grabbing Bobson, so it's not really a problem to have that stock. And Cheesecake's territory, you can see, just isn't getting all that much done, just having a very hard time recovering from that misfound. Instead, focusing on Vampirus and trying to just push for that, I think, is the right move.
Now, Vampirus does have a slight cash advantage on Bogus Rogus, but that will disappear as she continues to buy into Bogus Rogus. Bogus Rogus is sitting at 218k in debt and climbing. Decided not to pay down that debt and hoping that their
The
production
black
can
market is online.
swing them through the game.
Right, and just being that scientist, I feel like there's a decent chance of that. One thing we never mentioned this game, this $498 Pleasure Dome. With 3 scavengers on the board, Pleasure Domes were going to be good. Bogus Rogus, noticing that, picking up virtual reality as well. Really making that tile work.
Now Vampirus, Power Surge, Bogus
Launch
Rogus.
affirmative.
Cheesecake
What a
has
payout.
decided to Power Surge Vampirus.
Now this decision is
You would not
troubling
believe
to me,
who
going
caught
for the second
red-handed.
off-world as Bogus Rogus. I think he had enough income, perhaps, to already take down Vampirus. Pushing into the second off-world pulls the game out a bit longer. Maybe it pulls it out long enough for Bogus Rogus's debt to really come into play. But we shall see.
Yes. Thinking Machines was picked up by Bobson, so neither player has that to help to lower the cost of their off-worlds, or actually there's no dynamite, so to lower the mutiny or freeze time of the off-worlds.
The optimization center
At this
is
point in
online.
time,
Let the
well, we have
planned
Vampirus
obsolescence
also going
begin.
into a second
Off-world
off-world.
market is assembled. Our fortune
It was
awaits.
questionable for Bogus Rogus. What do you think about Vampirus building that second off-world?
I think at the time it might have been
Successful off-world shipment.
difficult to
Make room for the
see
profits.
Vampires winning the race
The
without
black market
having
is
some
open for
sort of
business.
advantage. The second off-world was one way to try to look for it. Maybe if Vampires had known that Bogus Rogus was going for a second off-world,
Price manipulations to
he
begin
could have held
shortly.
off on that and tried to save up and
Mhm.
win before that paid off, but either way, it wasn't a good situation for Vampires.
Vampirus's black market cooldown is going to come off at any time.
These were-
Unfortunately, she just mutinied a partially frozen off-world.
It has been
from
getting
Cheesecake.
continuously frozen this whole time, so it only is 20 some odd second freeze, so it's the diminishing effects really coming into play.
Bogus Rogus has the buy on Vampirus if they cancel some of their launches and sell out, and indeed they do. Clinching the game. And at this point, Cheesecake will be bought out. Momentarily, I don't see any way for them to come back, unfortunately. That misfound really hurt them.
Right, and
as
this
we
game
mentioned
really,
before.
Vampires played it out fairly solidly. There may be little mistakes here and there.
Launch affirmative.
We
What a
noticed this
payout.
Pleasure Dome going uncontested was a big bonus to Bogus Rogus. The 2 aluminum tiles, maybe just leaving Vampires a little short on production. And those are the little sort of things that caused her to not quite be able to get there despite taking that nice early lead.
Right. The other mistake at the beginning, I think this scientist spot that Bogus Rogus found is clearly the best spot on the map, and it went for really cheap.
Yeah,
Bogus Rogus got it for not very much debt, only $16,000 in debt. I personally would have taken that a little bit earlier, somewhere in the upper 20s would be my personal preference.
definitely. Maybe even 30,000 just or higher, seeing how difficult the other spots might have been. Not particularly difficult, but the resources are a bit on the weak side, and as a scavenger, you never really want to deal with weak resources.
Bogus Rogus has the buy, just waiting for them to notice that they can buy. There we go, finishing up the game. A overall well-played game by Bogus Rogus.
Just making good use of scientific tiles and taking advantage of all the high prices.
The only mistake that we thought Bogus Rogus might have done, which we pointed out, was not going into more of these water-based tiles. putting those chemical refineries, for example, in a spot that they couldn't be converted with, but it ends up not costing him anything in this game.
Right, just a bit of an overcommitment to carbon instead of maybe water, but did enough good things to pull him through.
Bogus Rogus looks like they're also continually going for the hacks. I'd like to see what they were hacking. 2 shortages on chems, 2 shortages on glass, and 1 shortage on food. The shortage on chems, I believe we mentioned at the time, was a very good play, as Bogus Rogus was the only one in chemicals at that point in time. The food, on the other hand, I think everybody was in food when that hack would have been going off, and I'm not sure. No one was really ever in glass other than Bogus Rogus, so that was a good hack as
Yeah,
well.
Vampirus was sort of in and out of food and glass, but I assume the timing of Bogus Rogus's hacks worked well with that. Or at least those transitions would have been awkward for Vampirus anyway.
Right. It's hard to use a hack array in FFA, so kudos to Bogus Rogus for identifying those hacks to get. I don't believe I have anything else to say about this game. Any last thoughts, Blues?
No, not much else to add here.
Let's head on into the next one then.